All right, so for this lecture, guys, we're going to finish up the unit for the urinary system. We're going to take a little bit of a look at water maintenance as well as acid-base balance, and then finish up with a little bit of some developmental aspects for the urinary system. So water balance, normal water about amounts of water in the body range greatly depending on age as well as gender. So most young adults and females are somewhere between 50 to 60% water. Babies are quite a bit more. They're about 75% water. And then as we age, that water retention goes down. Um, Water is obviously one of those necessary things for maintaining body function as well as maintaining appropriate levels of other things in the body, specifically blood. But that's the reason why we're kind of looking at there. Right? There's two different types of fluid. So there's intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid. So intracellular is inside of cells, extracellular is outside of cells. Extracellular fluid can also be, so intracellular fluid, sorry, is mostly going to be your cytoplasm that you see inside of those cells. Extracellular fluid can be broken up into two categories, interstitial fluid as well as blood plasma. Interstitial fluid would be fluid that's in between the tissues. This would be the fluid that leaks out from the capillaries, from the bloodstream, and then also is picked up back by the lymphatic system. And then obviously blood plasma is just a liquid or kind of watery portion of plasma of blood itself. Okay. A little bit of a link between water and salt. So changes in electrolyte balance obviously can cause water to move from one compartment to the other. This is simply just a concentration gradient. This is natural diffusion, or in this case, it's osmosis, which is just a type of diffusion. So if you've got a concentration gradient on one side of a cell or another, we can and then cause this water to move one direction or another. It's also the reason why when people eat salty foods, they usually retain more water, or they can feel like they're retaining more water, or what they call bloat, because now the body's hanging onto more water to equalize that salt balance. We can also see changes if there is an increase in or decrease in blood volume. All right, so if we have more blood volume, obviously more water will actually move from the blood into those tissues as well. So people that have an increased blood volume as well as an increased blood pressure can do that the same, which is why a lot of people who have high blood pressure usually take some sort of diuretic. So they're taking a pill or what they call a water pill. So it's causing then their kidneys to reabsorb more of that water and get rid of it through urine. It can also impair cell activity. If we don't have enough water, obviously it's a main function of both cellular respiration as well as moving substances across the cell membrane. But also if there's too much water, that can cause issues. All right. I don't know if you guys remember back to bio when we talked about the difference between animal and plant cells. We're animal cells, so we don't have a cell wall. So if you intake too much water into an animal cell, it can actually burst. All right. So that's why too much water inside of that cell can cause issues. To maintain water balance, we have to look at a couple different things. So sources of water obviously are mostly our food. So it's foods and fluids that we ingest, and then any water produced by metabolic processes. So cellular respiration is going to produce some water in that process as well. Sources of output, we can have evaporation from the lungs. We can lose it through perspiration. We can lose it through feces, and we can also obviously urine production or places we can lose this. Maintaining water balance is important for a couple different reasons, but also if you have somebody who has very dilute urine, so the urine is very clear when they go to the bathroom, it's most likely they have an excess water intake, or in some cases they could have some sort of metabolic problem. Their metabolism is really high, so they're producing a ton of excess water through there. If a person is producing less urine or more concentrated urine, so urine that usually is a very dark color, we worry that the person is either not producing enough water or they've got some sort of an issue with their kidneys. Their kidneys are pulling out too much water for them. Diabetes insipidus would be an example here. So, diabetes insipidus would be an example of the dilute urine. So the kidneys are pulling out tons and tons of water. This one would be a case where the kidney is not pulling out as much water. All right, so the person probably is bloated or starting to retain water, and they're just not getting rid of it enough through their kidneys. The proper concentration also can have a huge issue on electrolytes as well. All right. Regulation and absorption. Remember, this is controlled by hormones, usually by the hypothalamus here. So the regulatory hormone that normally we're worried about when we start looking at kidney function is the ADH, the antidiuretic hormone. So this is the one that prevents excessive loss of urine. So if they're producing an appropriate amount of this, we should have a balanced water system. If they're not producing enough of it, right, then they're probably getting rid of too much water. And then if they're producing too much of it, then this person is probably retaining excess water. The other one that kind of helps us regulate that is aldosterone. This is the one that regulates both sodium as well as extracellular fluid. And then this is the one that also triggers that other hormone that we talked about that's produced by the kidneys, that renin. All right. And then again, this just kind of reiterates what I just talked about a few minutes ago, is that the kidneys and the hypothalamus really are the two motivators here that kind of monitor this process. Right. Maintaining acid-base balance in blood. Blood pH really should be somewhere between 7.35 and 7.45, so it should be kind of basic to help us maintain homeostasis within the body. If we have the situation of alkalosis, so the blood becomes too basic, we're above 7.4. And if we end up with a person who has acidosis, we end up with a pH that is below 7.35. So they're becoming more acidic in this case. Alkalosis could be caused by intake of foods or a huge influx of water. So people can actually drink too much water, all right? There's usually a story that is always kind of told, or an article that sometimes is read, at least in my biology classes. It was a story where a marathoner drank nothing but water throughout the entire marathon she was running. And at the end, she started to have some issues. Well, they found out she had alkalosis. She had ingested so much water that it had kind of leached out, or kind of allowed a lot of the electrolytes and salts in her body to leach out to try to balance that system of water, or the amount of water that she was bringing in. So that would be bad. Acidosis would happen on the other hand. They're either drinking not enough water, or they're ingesting things that are diuretic. So coffee, alcohol, specifically anything with caffeine in it would cause that problem. Energy drinks would kind of fall in the line of this, of somebody who might end up with acidosis because of the increased urine production. So now we're getting rid of more water, and the fluid inside of the body becomes more concentrated. Okay, most of those ions originate byproducts of cellular metabolism. So again, cellular respiration is going to give us most of those. And then urine pH should be somewhere between 4.5 and 8. Right, it's a huge range, I know, because it can really have to do with the amount of solutes that are in it, as well as the amount of water that's in it. Right. Most of that balance is maintained, obviously, again, by the kidneys, but there's also a few other ones, blood buffers. So there's bicarbonate and other things that are in our bloodstream that help to try to control that system, as well as respiration. So we will actually get rid of a lot of those things through just simple respiration to try to maintain that balance, which is also one of the things sometimes we can see if somebody's having an issue with this acid balance base. Sometimes their breath will be either fruity or very kind of can be kind of sour, right? Because they're trying to get rid of some of that through respiration, so it will show up on there. So people with diabetes, a lot of times, if they have too much sugar in their body, their breath can actually be really fruity because their body's trying to make up for that process by getting rid of it, and it just sometimes can't be able to keep up. All right, finishing up here with a little bit of some developmental aspects of the urinary system. So functional kidneys start to work about month 3. Right, urinary bladder system of a newborn. Obviously, the bladder is really small, which is why babies have to go to the bathroom so often. Right, and then the urine can't actually be concentrated because the bladder is so small. So most of the time, unless there's some sort of an issue, all right, baby's urine should be pretty clear. All right, it's okay for it to be that way. If it's really concentrated, then the baby is most likely either dehydrated, or we have some sort of an infection, could be bladder infection or something that's causing that. Aging, so there is a progressive decline in urinary function as we get older. So the kidneys slowly start to not pull out as much toxins and things as they should. Obviously, the bladder starts to shrink as we get to old age. Urinary infections are pretty common in older individuals because of those couple things, because of the decline in because of the decline in kidney function, as well as kind of the shrinking of that bladder, because they tend to hold on to urine longer. They're not they're not producing as much water. They're not pulling as much water out of the system through the kidneys, so the urine becomes really concentrated. And then urine retention is common in males, mostly because, again, the urethra is much longer, and the bladder is a little bit larger. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and kind of finish up there. If you guys have questions, please make sure you're reaching out. Otherwise, we'll try to finish up and review a little bit on Thursday. Test this Friday. Okay. See you guys.